Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is the Board Watch. I am Robert Dashiell. Joining me as usual is my colleague, attorney Hassan Barnes.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right,
Jump in.
before we get into today's program, I want to make a couple of announcements and actually a request. As for those of you who've been watching this program from the beginning, or you've seen at least one or more episodes, you know how difficult it is for us to confine our information that we give to matters that appear before the Baltimore City Board of Estimates. We often talk about, as we will today, what's happening at the federal sector or at the state sector. Well, the reason for that is simple. Uh, the city receives, or did receive at least, a significant amount of its money for contracting, particularly public works contracting, through the federal government. And so we can't talk about contracting opportunities in the city without recognizing the extent to which those opportunities may be adversely impacted by the loss of federal and or state money. In fact, as we reported earlier, the city has brought suit against the federal government related to the Trump administration's cutoff of various funding sources, in addition to the dismantling or the attempted dismantling of various and numerous federal agencies. Now, and because we recognize that we cannot talk about Baltimore City in a vacuum or in isolation, we're even wondering whether the name the Board Watch is sufficient to inform you, the viewing public, as to the anticipated content of this program. To that end, we have decided that perhaps to reconsider the name of this program and call it something other than the Board Watch, and so that you will know that we may be talking about things other than the specifically or exclusively the agenda of the Baltimore City Board of Estimates. If you have any ideas about that issue and what we should do, please either inform us in the chat box, which is available to you, or you can call me at 410-456-8606, or Hassan at
Certainly 443-423-0548.
We look forward to receiving your comments or suggestions, because in the end, what we want this program to be is relevant and informative. And we will do the best we can to make sure that the information we share fits those two categories and is as accurate as we can make it based upon currently available information. All right. Having said that, I'm going to ask Hassan what's on his mind today.
Thank you. So as we talk about Board Watch and expanded, I'm always brought back to development and finances on local, state, and federal level. I saw an article yesterday that in Baltimore City, Mayor Brandon Scott canceled a contract with Tesla. There was a $5 million contract for the city to buy electric vehicles from Tesla, which was surprising. Now, the Board of Estimates have open hearings. You can go and come and see and watch for yourself, where they vote on all kind of things. Quite often it's open, but most people don't see it, right? So just because it's open, it doesn't mean people know what's going on. I had no idea the city was buying Teslas from Tesla. $5 million is a lot of money. I'm assuming a lot of cars. It was in the news because Mayor Scott canceled the contract in September. He decided to pull back from using Tesla, and instead they want to use Ford. Previously, they had Ford, and they were able to acquire, I think they're Mach-E's. They're electric vehicles that Ford makes. The Ford Mustang is no longer the Mustang, now it's the electric vehicle. Okay. Mach-E, which is interesting. I guess my interest for me is, as you were talking last week about Elon Musk, and Mayor Scott did this before Elon Musk went his whole rampage against government employees. It's interesting having the head of a company who wants to fire as many government employees as possible to actually make his money from government and government spending. is kind of contrary. The idea that the federal government want to downsize and pull in to prevent waste and over expense, but they also, people were saying that, are being wealthy on government funds. One of the reasons we started the Board Watch was because I have clients and Bob has clients who are trying to get contracts with government, state, local, or federal, and they have a hard time at it. Most of the time, it's minority contractors. They have a hard time accessing those competitive spaces because they don't even have the overhead, they don't have the actual liquidity, they don't have the funds to do it. The big companies go out their way to limit, from what I can tell, what I've seen in my experience with my clients, to limit small companies' participation. They do it by forcing the issue of having prime contractors and having certain budgets to be large enough where a big company can come in, a small company can't. Tesla is at a space where Elon Musk has the ear of the president, right? So they can get all kind of deals passed that my clients can't get done. My clients can't call the president. They can't call Governor Westmore. They can't call Mayor Scott. They have to go in and try to be competitive, and sometimes being competitive isn't enough. And for me, that $5 million contract was a great example of that. And the fact that the mayor said, hey, or I think this article said that Bill Henry indicated, the comptroller Bill Henry indicated that they was going to transfer the funds and buy more for it. I don't know if that was competitive. I think they can call for it and say, hey, we want more vehicles, take us some more money. I'm sure there are other vehicle providers who will be willing to come in and step in to be part of that process. But that's the kind of thing where it's almost like a no bid or a sole source contract. People are able to do federal contracting, where you can just get funds and get contracts just because they like you and they want to buy from you. Again, my clients are small businesses. They don't have that kind of connection with. No one's going to call my client who does concrete work and say, hey, we want to hire your firm and do all the concrete work in Baltimore. That hasn't happened. If it happened, to be great, but I haven't had that experience happen.
Well, you raise a number of issues, but fundamentally, it seems to me you're really talking about the extent to which the city can and does award contracts on some basis other than competitive bidding. And the city charter provides a number of ways for that to occur. It can be a so-called sole source contract, which typically means that it's supposed to mean that there is only one source for the goods or services that the city needs. Another type of no bid contract is an emergency contract, which means that the city has to respond to typically you see bursted water lines that often happens because of winter freezes and that sort of things. That's an emergency contract, and there's no time to go through the typical competitive bid process, which even in the best of circumstances would take at least a couple of months, where you can't leave water gushing from water mains or sewage spilling over into the streets for 2 months while you go out and select bids. The third type of a no bid contract is one where there may be a different source, more than one source for the goods or materials, and it's not an emergency, but for some other reason, the city can determine that there would be no benefit to be derived from competitively bidding the matter, because the market circumstances are such that we know in advance, or at least they believe they know in advance, who would likely win the competitive bid anyway. So if that's the case, then why spend the time and the expense of going through it if the outcome has been predetermined by market conditions, presumably, over which the city has no control. The real issue, the fundamental issue for new companies, small businesses or minority businesses or black-owned businesses, is that the essence of public procurement, of government procurement, all is related to this issue of low bid, and and that which presents a structural impediment to access on the part of small and or minority contractors, because as you might anticipate, the companies that are able to submit the lowest bid are those who over time or perhaps immediately have been able to acquire the greatest resources to bring to bear in offering those goods or services. Now, in the case of minority contractors, we say that we presume that that accumulation of resources resulted in part from the deliberate denial, intentional denial of access to minority firms. And so we create a preference, a minority business program as such. And with respect to small businesses generally, which include minority businesses for the most part, we say that the general economy turns on small business, and so it is important to preserve some level of competition, that we not allow a monopoly to be created simply by virtue of the size of the entity.
No, 1 second, Bob. I want to jump into that. So for the audience, what do we have in procurement law other than the issue of the MBE or the 8A or WMBE that would protect small businesses from the juggernauts, right? So the huge corporations who have all the funds, all the means, because they can always get low bid. They can push people salaries down. They can do things at scale that have cost savings. What is done other than those programs to allow small businesses to compete?
Well, the preference programs that I was talking about, the minority business program, Baltimore City has a small business reserve program. The state has a small business reserve program. Basically, and you mentioned 8A, the most effective way that's been proven over time to protect and make sure that these other companies have access is to carve out a piece of the market and reserve it for them, so that only they can compete for it. As I say, Baltimore City has a small business reserve program. There's a cap on the size of the contract that can be procured or solicited under that. I think the cap is $500,000. At the state, I think the cap at the state level is also $500,000, although there's presently a bill pending in the General Assembly to increase this cap at the state level to $1 million. What that means is that only certified small businesses or certified minority businesses will be eligible to compete for those contracts, meaning they won't have to compete against what you referred to, described as the so-called juggernauts. Those things are necessary. The problem, of course, is that it all comes down to political will. In most cases, one of the resources, the biggest resource that the larger companies have is cash or access to funding. Well, running for political office is big business. Whether you're running for city council person or the president of the United States. I mean, according to reports, Elon Musk contributed somewhere between $270 to $290 million to either directly to the Trump campaign or to so-called super PACs that were dedicated to the Trump candidacy. And we saw that the other day, Trump extended to Musk a new franchise area, a new dealership, if you will, the lawn of the White House, where he displayed, I'm told, 6 Teslas and touted the fact that Trump was going to buy one for $80,000 and give it away. Well, Musk has the access that he has, including his 3-year-old son, has that access because I suspect of the amount of money that he's contributed to and continues to contribute to Trump. In fact, he said that day that in appreciation for his new market area, he was considering giving Trump directly or indirectly another $100 million. Well, that is well beyond what's the capacity of small or minority business to do. It's well beyond the capacity of almost any business or individual to do.
I'll say this: you point out to Elon Musk, and I do think it was extravagant. The idea that the president will come out and pitch as a pitch man for a private company. I'm not sure if it's unprecedented. I feel like it's unprecedented. It's extravagant, but the reality is the juggernauts do that every single day. they have access. Not on TV. They typically have more wherewithal to do it where it's not seen, but they have the ability to meet the leaders, whether it's state, local, or federal, in much more intimate settings, and can contribute financially to their campaigns in other ways to make sure they get what they want. So although Elon Musk is in the news and it seems jarring to me to see the president in a Tesla and arguing about buying a Tesla and saying, go buy the great car. The reality is Elon Musk's stock for Tesla has gone down substantially. His personal net wealth has lost tens of billions of dollars, much more than I have. I don't have $1 billion, but he lost tens of billions of dollars because around the world people are not buying Teslas because of his antics, his behavior, and how he's doing things in the U.S. with Doge and his support of Trump. But again, I go back to the idea for small businesses. My clients are small businesses. They don't have the ability to contribute to a campaign or to a politician to that extent. My client make a pound of sandwich, but beyond that, their finances are limited. And we've seen over and over again, Elon can give $100 million to Trump because although he's saving money through Doge, he's getting more and more government contracts in the billions. So it works in a different way. And we talk about sole source or direct no bid contracts. That's the primary, from what I've seen, the use of them. People have been able to convince the government that they're the guy, and the government has gone all in. Whether the quality is there isn't always the case, and they've gone all in for big companies in a way that's made them very, very wealthy.
Well, there's no question, but there is a synergy between the wealth of the company and its owners and the relationship, if you will, with elected or appointed officials. In recognition of that, really, Baltimore City, the state, the federal government has, so-called pay to play.
I was going to say, was that pay to play or pay to pay?
Pay to play statutes, which it presumably require government contractors to file reports periodically disclosing how much they actually contribute to the campaigns or to entities that are related to the campaigns of at least elected officials. From what I can see, even when those reports are filed, and those reports as to the city are supposed to be available to the public, so you can go in and see which contractors or the owners of what companies have contributed the most to elected officials, and from time to time, it's even reported in the media. Most of the time, that's not on a consistent basis. That's only when there's some issue that somehow is sensationalized to the point where they think the public might be interested.
One second, Bob. To that point, CNN has Elon Musk given Trump campaign about $260 million.
Right.
So it's out there. He paid $260 million,
right,
and they're not hiding. So the fact that you can say it out loud, people know how much it is, it doesn't stop the influence, right? So you can have a pay-to-play statute. People can say, no, I gave it to a super PAC, I gave here, I gave there. It's still known. I mean, the politicians are receiving funds, and they're doing it in the open, and they're being lobbied, I would say, very openly and very publicly, and those laws haven't stopped that.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, there have been various attempts over the years through enactment of campaign finance laws that allow for public financing of campaigns to try to level the playing field between those people who want to seek office and those who may have been designated by a particular political party or interested party and funded to the extent that the general public would not be able to in any individual way. And so you've had these public finance laws which are supposed to allow whoever wants to run and who can gain sufficient popularity, and these are really popularity contests. But that doesn't do any good in situations where the public really is not involved in the selection of the candidate in the first place. We saw a real example of that in the case of the last presidential election with Kamala Harris. You heard the clamor that the Democrats really didn't have it. Once Joe Biden decided to pull out, that they did not undertake any means of selecting a replacement candidate that reflected the will of even the majority of Democrats, let alone the majority of people in the country generally. There was a decision made politically that Kamala Harris had to be the nominee of the Democratic Party, and many people complained about that. So if the public doesn't have a way of selecting the people that would be its leaders, and we are left, as we have been historically, with selecting or electing from among those that are determined to supported by the rich and famous, so to speak, then the system won't change, and that we have no reason to expect that it will until the people actually become more informed, which we hope to do through this program.
Now, beyond Elon Musk and his ability to convince the president to be a pitchman for him for his Teslas, what other example do you have of either emergency contract awards, sole source awards that's more tangible for our viewers?
Well, if you look, the Board of Estimates, the next meeting of the Board of Estimates is next Wednesday, which I think is the 19th, if I'm not mistaken. The agenda for that meeting is available online. And I suggest you go look at that agenda. You can find it through the website of the Baltimore City Comptroller, Bill Henry, and you go to the Board of Estimates, and eventually you'll get a menu option for Board of Estimates agenda for March 19. You can pull that agenda. The agenda, as Hassan has said many times, is hundreds of pages long, but it's much better organized now than it has been in the past. Now it's color coded. If you want to know what contracts are coming from the Department of Public Works, the DPW contract, you'll see a green banner across the top. If you want to know what contracts or grant awards or agreements are coming from the mayor's office, it might be a lavender or a purple banner across the top. And Recreation and Parks is, I think, a green or light green. So each agency had Comptroller Henry has been organized the agenda so that each agency has its own color, and you can sort of flip through the 200 pages and find the color for the applicable. Now, what it still doesn't do, and it would be a step further, would be to actually come up with a real index or table of contents. That hasn't been done, and nor are the minutes from the Board of Estimates indexed. So, for example, if you because the Board of Estimates not only awards contracts but hears disputes over the award of contracts, in many cases you want to, and if you're a small business and you want to challenge that there's been favoritism in some way, and you want to go back and see what the board has done historically, you can't index the board minutes. If you don't remember the specific meeting at which the issue was raised, then you're basically out of luck. Because there's no topical index to board minutes, and so there's no way to actually establish what precedent exists for making one decision or the other. And I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that the Board of Estimates acts on the basis of precedent. They do when they want to, and in other cases they don't. The precedent is whatever that somebody says it is. And the interesting thing for me is that I've been making appearances before the Board of Estimates and arguing bid protests before the estimates. In some cases, even before some members of the board were even born, and certainly longer than any of them have been in public office. And so in many cases, my recollection of precedent is better than theirs, and certainly it may be better than what the minutes show. If there are minutes.
You mentioned precedent. I'm not sure they keep a record of precedent. Certainly, we have on the Board of Estimates the chief legal officer for Baltimore City, but I'm not sure she is there giving her legal opinion. I think she's voting as a board member. There's no legal counsel that's advising the board that I know of during those hearings. Am I wrong on that?
Well, you raise an interesting point. Is the city solicitor mayor's lawyer or the city's lawyer?
Under the charter, I believe she's the city's lawyer. She's the highest lawyer in the city.
Yeah.
But I think she's there as a member. She's not there as giving legal counsel.
That's true. When agencies appear before the Board of Estimates, and each agency has an assigned counsel from the Department of Law.
Yes.
So what happens is the lawyer that works for the city solicitor is there representing an agency in front of the city solicitor, who's there to vote as a member of the Board of Estimates. So you might imagine that not often does the boss vote against the people who work for him. So, and that's true. That's also true. The problem with the current composition of the board. I don't have to remind you that the board has 5 members, and each member has a single vote. Of those members, only 3 are elected by the people. The other 2 are appointed by the mayor, the director of public works, and the city solicitor. The elected officials are the comptroller and the president of the city council. So, in a very rare situation, in fact, I can tell you that in the 50 years or so that I've been in this business, the last 35 to 40, which involve appearances before the Board of Estimates, I have never seen either a city solicitor or a director of public works vote against whoever the mayor was at that time. I've never seen that.
I mean, it could be that what the mayor says is reasonable and practical, and he has great ideas. They may hit him or her. They may just be right on the facts. It may be happenstance that no one votes against him because they appointed him. There's no link.
Well, that is the problem with the so-called city procurement process. They say they talk about having procurement laws, but in a system, if you wanted to look at a system where there is, quote, due process, meaning notice, meaning an opportunity to present evidence, meaning a situation where those offering testimony are at least sworn to tell the truth, which again doesn't happen, which is interesting. When you go before the zoning board, you have to, as a witness, you have to raise your hand and swear to tell the truth. You don't have to do that when you're going before the Board of Estimates. The city ought to adopt, and I've urged for many years that the city adopt the mechanism that exists in other jurisdictions, where the contracting authority is different from the authority that resolves issues on relating to the award of the contract. And where there's time to actually investigate protests. As I said before, in Baltimore City, you can file your protest on a Monday and it be heard 48 hours later. Obviously, that's insufficient time. There's no hearing, there's no evidence, and there's no opportunity for anything to happen except those who are making the recommendation to lock arms and march forward in whatever decision they've already made.
I think the issue for that is if you are a contractor, there's no guardrails, right? So we have the procedure where if you feel like you lost and you want to do a big protest, you go in front of the Board of Estimates, and there's no legal counsel there. They make a decision based on some internal indication that you have no way to argue against. So you're arguing for why you think you should be given, and there's no level of precedence like court. They may argue one thing on one day, something different on another day. So you're going against the board. Hence, most of my clients don't even go. They lose, even if they feel like they had the best bid. They very rarely do bid protests because they don't think it's not fruitful. It doesn't actually respond or result in them getting the actual bid reissued or them actually being competitive. So they don't want to pay to have me talk. Although I don't mind going to board estimates and saying things, getting paid for it. Most of my clients will find better use of their funds, which means I suggest most people who have valuable or valid arguments won't even go forward because they don't see it as being reasonable or practical.
Well, I put it another way, that the whole idea of public contracting is that there should be a level playing field, that there should not be, except in cases where preference was deliberate and intentional, for example, where you reserve work for small business or minority business. Otherwise, there should be everybody who has what they believe the government wants in terms of goods or services ought to have the opportunity to offer that on the same basis, on a level playing field. And that just really doesn't exist. And the only way to ensure its existence is that if you have an opportunity or a system whereby it can be challenged, where the process can be challenged in a way that recognizes due process, and it just is not there in the way that Baltimore City awards contracts.
That's a good point, Bob. Are you able to take an appeal or to bring a civil action against? I guess you can bring a lawsuit against the city if you feel like you were denied a contract impermissibly or with due to bias. You can go to court and file suit, which will take you a year or 2 or 3 to go and litigate. Have you seen that happen before?
Very rarely, because the bar is too high. In order to reverse a decision of the Board of Estimates, almost any administrative agency, you've got to be able to prove that the decision was arbitrary, capricious, or in violation of law, if, or otherwise fraudulent. It's not enough to be able to say that it doesn't make sense, or it lacks common sense, or that you disagree. And so you can imagine that there are very, very few cases. If you have, and also the other problem is the parties who want to challenge the procedure are often, in most cases, those who either have or are seeking other contractual relations. So you have a conceptual problem of, do I sue the hand that feeds me, so to speak? And in addition to the fact that the likelihood of success in any action brought is really very small, because if you really want to be effective, you got to not just bring an ordinary suit, but you got to ask the court for an injunction. You got to seek some, so which means that the cost in legal fees and so forth that are at least doubled, or in some cases quadrupled, because you have to do everything within a very short time frame. And so there haven't been very many cases. I think over the last 30, 40 years, I can remember that I've been involved in maybe only 2 or 3. And in those cases, the matter was resolved before there was a judicial determination on the merits of the case.
I want to go back some. We talked about some no bid contracts, whether emergency or sole source. From my mind, emergency is a water main break, and we need somebody to fix that right now. What have you seen in terms of local, whether local or state or federal contracts, where there's been emergency basis but not quite an emergency?
Well, at both the state and local level, most of the emergencies that I've seen result from somebody not doing their job on time.
Give me an example of what you mean by
that. Every contract has an expiration date, and in order to to change vendors, or even to prepare for the next contract, there's normally a transition period required. Even for an existing vendor, if they're successful on winning it, there's time to the terms of the contract could change from the one that you have to the one that you just won.
So like where the contract ends on June 31st, or
right,
and the new one begins July 1st, that kind of thing.
Right. So if you're intending to provide the opportunity for whoever wants to submit a bid, you've got to complete the solicitation documents, the bid documents, well in advance of the day that the new service would begin. If the new service is supposed to begin on July 1, you can't put it out for bid on June 30th. So what happens is, what if I was too busy? So let's say the bid documents had to be ready by April 1st, but I was overwhelmed by work, I got behind or whatever, and the documents just weren't ready. So as a result of that, we now at July 1st, when we need a new service. Well, the contract doesn't provide for any renewal, so I can't just extend it with the current vendor. But we need the service. That's the emergency. The emergency is that we have to have the service. There's no time to put it out for competitive bidding like I should have. But the absence of the time is because I didn't do my job early enough. I didn't do it soon enough. And so I've seen in fact, very recently, I worked on some changes in the state procurement law for the Department of General Services. And one of the recommendations I made was to to modify the definition of an emergency to specifically exclude man-made issues. You know, when you're right, most people think of emergency as something occurs over which we didn't had no control and could not have reasonably foreseen. Uh, the government and the taxpayer should be able to foresee and anticipate that people do their jobs on time, so that you don't have to worry. Because emergency contracts because they're no bid, are very expensive.
Yes.
They're very expensive. Basically, you're negotiating a price rather than having the marketplace determine the best price available.
And I'm not opposed to businesses making a profit. I think that's what the purpose of a business is in the first place. I think you're right. I think it's inherently hard for a government or municipality to enter a contract. They just say, "Hey, we got to do this right now." It's like if you have your pipes in your house burst and you call a plumber, what do they charge you to pay?
Right.
If they say $5,000, you say, "Oh, it's horrible. Why are you doing me like this?" And you can find a way to pay it. If you can't flush your toilet, you got to pay it. Right. So no matter what you say, you got to pay it. So the government walking in with their hands behind their back saying we have no choice, as taxpayers, it's an issue. So besides the emergency,
that's the same principle. I see. So Anthony Jefferson says, so there's a winding down issue. Yes. By winding down, you mean the period which the current vendor exits the contract, and the new vendor, based upon having won the competitive bid, gets set up or mobilizes, if you will, to be able to commence work. That there is such a period. It's winding down period, if you want to call it that. There is such a period required under every contract. And so if you don't put the new bid out in time to allow for that winding down period, then you're faced with a quote emergency, which requires that you award an emergency contract.
Now, besides emergency, we have sole source. What has been your experience? Have your clients received sole source contracts, and so how have they gotten them?
I don't have a client who's ever gotten in 40 years. I don't have a single client that I can recall that's ever gotten a sole source contract. The sole source contract, by definition, is one where there's only one company that has the goods or services that are needed by the government at that particular time. There's only one place to get it, and I don't have, and in the area of small businesses or minority businesses, I rarely, in fact, I would say never, have I seen a situation where whatever it is they have to offer, they're the only ones that have to offer, that have it to offer. I just haven't seen that. I've seen plenty of sole source contracts, but on the other hand, when you think about why it is that there's only one company that has the goods or services that the government needs, and why that has occurred. Why would there be only one company if it's a need that the government has? Why is it that there would be only one company that can fulfill that need? In most cases, it's because the government has historically only done business with that one company. And because we in the world of in the economy, if there's an opportunity to make $1 by offering, and if I can offer something to that end, I'm going to offer it if I think there's a reasonable chance of being successful. But it takes resources to develop that capability. And if I look at the marketplace and I see that there's a giant already there, and who's been there forever, so to speak, I'm not going to waste time and money trying to go against a company that has had the work for many years, that has the relationships. You have to remember, the one thing that bureaucrats hate to do is change, because their primary objective is to satisfy their superiors, and that means there are no waves. Nobody's making waves. The work gets done, and so a level of confidence and trust is developed with people who are already in the system. I don't really want to do business with. As a bureaucrat, I don't really want to do business with anybody new, because then it means I got to spend some time finding out if they will perform, if I can trust them, if I can go to sleep at night because my boss isn't going to criticize me because the company I selected isn't doing the job properly. I don't want those anxieties. And the way to avoid them is to keep doing business with the people that I've always done business with.
So none of your clients receive sole source, but we know the federal government specifically has quite a few sole source. I suspect, and I don't know this for sure. I was looking to see if I can see. SpaceX is a company that does. I think recently they're trying to ferry the astronauts from the space station back home.
Yeah.
Stuff on the space station, but they've invented or developed a rocket that can go up and land itself, so it can be reused, which is a huge cost saving. They've also been tasked with ferrying goods from Earth to the space station. I believe they received sole source contracts, and they've received billions and billions and billions of dollars in contracts to do that work. No, I don't. I think it's very rare that only one company do a thing. It's just the nature of how business works. Not because other companies it's not financial. I think if there is an industry, if one company can do it, another company can do it as well. So SpaceX has been doing it, and they've been doing it in the industry. Other companies are going to space. Governments go to space. Besides the U.S. government and SpaceX, we have other countries flying to space and trying to land things on the moon now. So although we say sole source, I do think oftentimes I haven't seen any instance where only one company could do a thing. Like Microsoft, for years, were getting sole source contracts where there was no competition. Microsoft is an incredible company. There's other companies around that do what Microsoft does. Now, do they do it in a way that people know about it because Microsoft? No, but other companies can do the same work.
Well, you raise a question as what factors need to exist before you can determine that there's only one source available, and it's not necessarily that there literally be only one company. It could very well be that what you need in Baltimore. There's a company in Columbia, and the closest other company is in California. That could result in a sole source contract because because there's no effective means for the California company to deliver what you need in Baltimore. Doesn't mean there's not some. That could be a company somewhere in somewhere else in the world that has the goods or services, but as a practical matter, they are unavailable at the time or in the way that you need him to be in Baltimore. That could result in sole source contracts, and I suspect that in most cases it's impracticability rather than abject impossibility that results in sole source contracting in the first place. But we've talked a lot about Musk and his relationship with Trump, but Musk didn't become Trump. Musk, him and his brother Kimball under Trump. When Musk, the Tesla, which is his first profitable venture, other than PayPal, that became profitable under Obama. I think at that time Musk and his brother had developed an electric sports car,
the Roadster, yeah,
that was too expensive, and the battery life hadn't been fully evolved. And so I think it was President Obama that somehow managed to funnel about $600 million into the evolution and the further development of Tesla, which resulted in the S class or the S type, which was a sedan. And only when Tesla became Tesla when the sedan was able to hit the market. So it was not Trump that made Elon Musk. It was probably more likely Obama, which is to say, so that this notion that governmental assistance is limited to one political party or another is completely false. The notion that private industry is private and unrelated to government is absolutely false. None of whether it's Northrop Grumman or any of the other Microsoft, none of these private companies, let me state it another way. All of these companies rely significantly on their government contracts. And in many cases, though they obtained those contracts on a sole source basis.
There's an article from 2024. Palantir is a company that's been doing really well in the stock market. There was an article that the Army gave them a $619 million contract sole source award.
Mm.
Now, Palantir is a tech company. Palantir has been doing a lot of, they've been growing very, very rapidly recently. But they're a tech company. Anything Palantir can do, I suggest, and I could be wrong on this, maybe someone can tell me if I'm wrong or not, I assume Microsoft can do the same thing. I'm assuming as many IBM could do the same software. As many other companies that can do the work. The issue I have with sole source is we have politicians picking winners and losers. Because when you do sole source, it's not competitive. We're giving a guy a contract, and for whatever he says is work, we'll give it to him and pay him for it. And normally sole source contracts are big ones. They're not giving sole source contracts typically for $80,000 for a small contract in Baltimore City. As we said, we see here in the federal government, they give $hundreds of million contracts for contractors to come in and say we can do the work. I think sometimes sole source is we like this guy or this woman and we want to give them the deal because we think we can trust them and work with them, regardless of what else is in the field. We know what they got, we think they can do it, and we can give it to them. And we're willing to give them all this money because it's government money. So we'll give them taxpayer funds to see whether it works or not. And if it doesn't work, we may not use them again. Well, if you're paying somebody a couple $100 million, you use them again, it doesn't matter. And at that point, if you pay them that kind of money, you're not walking away from that person, right? Right. They ingratiate themselves in everything you do. If I'm a business owner and someone's giving me $600 million, everywhere you go, I'm going to be there. Every event you go to, I'm hosting.
Right.
I'm hosting it. Every time you go out of the country for a conference, I'm there in the crowd with my staff clapping everything you say, saying you're doing a great job, you're wonderful. I won't let you leave my side if I can, if you give me that kind of money for contracts without me having to hire someone to bid for it. And I think we see that. I think we see big corporations, we see as huge, they've made their money in government contracting from the people of the country and or the state, and we never know about it. And we never know how they've got to be behemoths. We made them that way without knowing.
But it's not always multi-million-dollar or these humongous contracts. I've seen, for example, next week at the board is being asked to approve 2 contracts coming from the Baltimore City Police Department. Both of them are under $200,000. One is for a company that's supposed to do psychological testing of recruits to determine whether or not they're psychologically well suited to carry weapons, that life-threatening weapons, or to perform their duties as a policeman. The other one is also part of the entrance process is for a company to perform polygraph tests for candidates. I don't think either one of those contracts, I don't think the Baltimore City Police Department competitively bid either of those contracts. I think both of those companies they've been using for years. And what you'll find is that the owners of those companies are members of the board of the Fraternal Order of Police, which is the labor organization that represents police, or as you say, they're regular sponsors or participants in various conventions and things of that nature, where the relationships have been established over the years, and so they're able to continue to receive those contracts without competitive bidding or without any effective bidding at all, because they have those relationships. Now the problem, of course, is sometimes those relationships can be inimical, can be adverse to the ultimate intent. If you can't have the fox guard in the hen house. You can't, if my job is to determine whether your recruits or your active members are psychologically suited to either get or keep their jobs, it makes a difference whether or not we share seats with one another on the board. It makes a difference whether we see one another at conventions or things of that nature. We can become too chummy or so chummy that the public loses confidence in the integrity of the system. See, perception, and unfortunately, is true. It's an old saying, but perception is reality. But my experience over the years, if it walks like a duck, if it quacks, if it's got a beak and webbed feet, it probably is a duck. So we've got to guard the public. Transparency doesn't mean that you simply tell me the decision you made. Transparency means you disclose the entirety, all the relevant information, so that I know how and why you made the decision.
And that part missing. So the transparency laws and rules, governments are very good at being transparent. But transparent means that you can see me.
Yeah.
And meetings are open to the public. They may be live streamed online. But you're right. The all the background and all the perspective isn't there. They throw it to the wall and say you got it, so transparent. And I assert you aren't. The reason we're talking about this for our viewers is most of the people watching this and want to and will currently do work with the government and get contracts. The reality, you have to have a full approach when you go to government and look for government contracts, because it's players in the field that may have advantages over you. They may be able to get emergency bid contracts. They may be able to get sole source contracts. They may be able to get no bid contracts because who they know and their history. So not only about you having the lowest bid, you have to find a strategy for you and your team to go after contracts in a way that's effective. And that may mean you being the board expert sitting down watching how things are done. That may mean you talking to people who have contracts who may have sole source. Say, hey, how'd you get that? Let's talk about it. Can we partner together? What can we do to work together? Because you may be iced out because they have sole source. But again, it's not just being the lowest bidder. Being the lowest bidder, you may work hard and you may get your payroll down and you may skimp the costs and you may have it so that you have a contract you're not getting paid on. It's paying staff so that you can have the experience, and you still don't get it. Having the lowest price isn't always a guarantee. I would suggest you make sure when you go for the bid process, you have a accountant available and or a lawyer available. Accountant available to run numbers with you to make sure what you're bidding you can actually do and be profitable. And have a lawyer just to talk it out. Lawyers don't only give legal advice; they give advice to counsel, so they can counsel you as to the practicality of situations, whether it makes sense for you to spend your time and energy doing things when it may not be fruitful. And hopefully, as we go through the show, we'll give you more tips and more support as to how you can further hone your bids, a bid approach, further hone your contracting department, and further hone your ability to get contracts, whether from local government, state, or federal government.
And that is particularly important when the contracting methodology is something other than an invitation for bids. For example, when the modality is a request for proposals or any method of procurement where there is a significant amount of discretion reserved in the procurement officer or the government agencies that's making the award. And quite frankly, to offset the so-called finality and inevitability of the outcome based upon the low bid, many governments have tried to move procurement towards the area where the procurement officer can exercise more discretion, where the low price is not necessarily the determining factor, is never the exclusive factor, but in many cases not even the determining factor into who gets the award. And they've done that as a means of trying to avoid the inevitable outcome of just having to award it to the low bidder. Well, and you may say that's great. That expands the opportunity for firms who maybe didn't have the accumulation of resources to be the low bidder. And that's true. The problem, however, is if the person who's exercising the discretion isn't making the decision for the right reasons, then you're worse off than the low bid situation.
I haven't seen it where the contracting officer didn't go to low bid. They went to a different bidder, and they went to someone who was from a small firm who couldn't do low bid because historically they didn't have the resources to have the revenue. I've seen them not go low bid for big companies, not for small companies.
Well, it depends on how the contract is advertised. If it's advertised as a request for proposals or some sort of hybrid, then where there's a technical proposal and a separate price proposal, then in none of those cases is the low price the determining factor. It's always a combination of the evaluation of the technical plus the price. But for example, if the contract is for cutting grass, now you cut grass or you don't. The grass is cut or it's not. You would think that there's no need for any particular discretion in that sort of contract. But I've seen grass cutting contracts now go from low bid to request for proposals. What's the result? The result is you end up picking a company that to cut all of the grass in Baltimore City that's got one Home Depot lawnmower because because of a desire. And it could be a legitimate desire, but you have a desire to expand the opportunity to this small company. Well, that's fine. The having the desire is fine, but the reality of it is, you still have to be able to do the work. You have to be able to do the work. And so what we need is people making those decisions because they're the right decisions, because they're the common sense decisions, and not because of who they like or not because of who gives them the most campaign contributions.
With that, I mean, that we both agree, and I think most citizens would agree to that as well. Now, that's a third type of no bid contract where the contracting officer just know, hey, we got a guy, we want to use them. We know they're the expert in the field. I've seen it in federal, I haven't seen that in local and state government. Is Baltimore City, are they likely to say, hey, we know that, I don't know, Hassan Barnes is the best lawyer in 5 states, so we gonna have him litigate all our cases going forward. Have you seen that kind of thing?
Well, I have seen favoritism on various grounds. I've seen favoritism towards local firms, and that again, that's all well and good to want to do that, but you have to be mindful of the fact that there are Baltimore City companies that do business elsewhere also. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you start making the locality of the business a criteria for award of the contract, it might seem like you're doing something that's very helpful to that local firm, but all the other companies, first, all the other companies that have submitted bids for Baltimore City, 2 things happen. Number one, they stop because they see the futility of trying to get a city contract because they're not located here. Number 2, wherever their home office is, wherever they do business, they're going to them and say, hey, don't give Baltimore contractors any preference here. Give me preference over them, because guess what? When I was bidding in Baltimore, they didn't give me anything. They put me at the back of the line because I wasn't from Baltimore. So nothing operates in a silo, in a vacuum. You've got to take into account the global effects. The other thing is we see cooperative contracts. Baltimore City on the agenda next week has a couple of things that they're buying under cooperative agreements. That's one where they are a member of a governmental organization that buys the goods or services cooperatively, thinking the theory is that you can get the lowest price by buying together. Well, that may be true, but you also got to consider the impact of that on the local businesses that are there. See, government is supposed, you want it to be efficient, but you can't ignore why government is there to make sure that, to try to ensure that the playing field stays level. And so that doesn't always mean that the low price is the best price. That doesn't mean that the low price is necessarily in the best interest. In a city like Baltimore and most other places, employment is very important, but not any employment. As I once said to former Mayor Catherine Pugh when Jeff Bezos was thinking about putting another warehouse or something here, and he's talking about, they talk about jobs. Well, the jobs, we don't need more minimum Amazon minimum pay jobs in Baltimore. We don't need any more jobs that pay $12 an hour in a city where it takes $25 an hour to raise your family. So it's got to be jobs that provide not sufficient income and hope. People have got to be able to have hope that through hard work they can better protect their family, provide more for their families, but more can't be unlimited. So there has to come a time when enough is enough.
So the government plays a huge role. I know there's dispute now with the federal government layoffs, and politicians have been saying, hey, if we lay people off and the whole town loses a good portion of their tax base, it's a problem. It shouldn't be a situation where the federal government is subsidizing certain towns and cities. The reality is the government is about improving the community, and that may mean jobs. Giving people reasonable salary and reasonable wage is a valuable duty the government has. And the government should want people who are paid well enough to take care of their family, because it goes back in circle, right? We pay taxpayers money to the government, and they hire people, and then it's a cycle. They use that money to go and hire lawyers and dentists and doctors and CPAs, and it cycles around. when you decide the government shouldn't be having people employed and you want to reduce your workforce, you're purposely reducing the average income of families across the country, because governments they pay a reasonable wage. Employees don't always have that same need or desire, and employers' goal is to be as profitable as possible, so they don't mind paying people as low as they possibly can.
Look at what's happening now with all the, of course, with Trump and the draconian cuts that Musk has been made, or Doge has made across the board. Now, fortunately, that judges around from California to Maryland, Judge Bidar yesterday, have issued orders that they reinstate those people. But when you're in a state like Maryland, where 5% of the workforce in Maryland works for the federal government.
I thought it was more than 5. I thought the Maryland budget, a good portion of it was 20-30% was based on federal government employees. But Maryland is right next to D.C., and many of the D.C. workers live in Maryland. Same way they live in Virginia, that they live around the Beltway, and we have many federal government agencies in Maryland and around Maryland. So we are one of the states that will be hit hard if Trump is allowed to continue. I said from day one that he'll do a lot of firing, there'll be a lot of lawsuits, and they may get pulled back, but the damage is done. When people are afraid of their job, they're leaving. If they try and find employment.
Have been more lawsuits filed against Trump in the first 100 days than there were against Biden or against Obama in all 8 years. So, but we have so much fun talking to you guys that we sometimes lose track of time. And as it is, we are over the 1 hour that we promised we would stick to in terms of keeping your attention. We appreciate the fact that you've tuned in for this episode of the Board Watch. Help us consider what additional changes we may make, and see you next Friday.
Take care, guys.
Bye-bye.